Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this face-to-face meeting on the topic Innovations for People with Spinal Cord Injury, New Freedom Through Movement. It's my pleasure to welcome you today on behalf of the Bern University of Applied Science. My name is Lukas Rohr and I'm the Director of the Department Engineering and Information Technology at the BFH. An exciting program awaits us this evening, and I'm especially pleased to be able to hold our event here in Nottwil at the site of the Swiss Paraplegic Foundation. At this point, I would like to take the opportunity and thank the Swiss Paraplegic Foundation for sponsoring tonight's event, and also thanks to our partners EPFL, GBI, Swiss Paraplegic Research and Uni Lausanne. Freedom is the focus of our event today. Freedom is generally understood as the possibility of being able to choose and decide between different options of movement. To be able to move freely in the city and in nature, to do sports and to have control over one's own body. Yet for people with spinal cord injury, this is not a matter of course. But rehabilitation research doesn't stand still. Today, we will learn how research can lead to more freedom of movement. Our 5 speakers are not only connected by their presence today, they are all also involved in the same trike study, in which one of them, according to their area of expertise, is providing new findings into the topic of movement with spinal cord injury. Today, ladies and gentlemen, you will hear firsthand from these experts about the latest research and innovations for people with spinal cord injury. We will start with Sebastian Tobler. Sebastian has been a lecturer in vehicle construction at Bern University of Applied Science since 2011. After an accident left him quadriplegic, he founded the startup Go By Yourself, or GBY, where he uses his knowledge as a vehicle builder to produce trikes. His personal story and his goal to give people with spinal cord injury more freedom will be leading his own research group in the field of equipment for the independent mobility of disabled people at the BFH in the future, in addition to his activities as a lecturer. Sebastian, welcome on the stage.
Rehabilitation, sport and health on 3 wheels for people with reduced mobility. As you can see, my name is just Sebastian Tobler. You don't see any professor or doctor, I don't know what. Since I'm in a wheelchair, I'm used in many studies for scientists, so I'm a laboratory monkey. So in a point of view from a scientist, I'm a speaking monkey in studies. Before I could move like every one of you, I could use my leg and go in the mountains and move freely everywhere. Since my legs were broken, or my spinal cord was broken, I could not use them, and I changed my bicycle for a wheelchair. And as you know, sitting kills, while moving heals. According to the World Health Organization, you need to do 10,000 steps every day. You have the choice to do it. I don't. When I found myself in a wheelchair, I had the possibility to do sport. But the possibility I had to do sport was always in a wheelchair or sitting. If I would take care of my legs, I had to go to the physiotherapist and move legs and the arms and different devices. I was not really convinced by doing this. So my goal was to bring, when I came home, to bring the movement not just outside on a bicycle or on a handbike, but also to bring the movement of my leg. So I was looking at the movement I used before my accident when I was walking. And when I was looking at my bicycle, I just saw one thing. It's that the movement used by human when they were walking was the same when they were on their bicycle. And that's since they discovered the bicycle. It's still the same movement you will find today on the modern bicycle. When I compared this movement with what happened with the people who have no legs but they have just arms, when I looked what was developed 100 years ago, I've seen that the first bicycle for the people who are using just their arms was in the same movement that they use for people who are using the bicycle with the legs. That means the first bicycle for the people who are in the wheelchair is with this movement. So something was changing between these pictures you have here and this one, a modern bicycle. Because the first bicycle, they had a problem. When they were pushing on one side, the bicycle was just turning in one direction, and when you are pushing in the other side, it was turning in the other direction. So the technical response for this problem was to push like this. It's quite interesting because I was just wondering why did they do that for people who are in a wheelchair? And I believe that the answer was quite easy. It was people who were injured and they had not a lot of money. So the only answer was, you have to be happy with this solution. And I was not happy with this. That means my goal was two things. First of all was to move all my body. That's why to move all my body, it was important to link the movement of the arms with the legs. And not only to link them together because my legs were, out of order. I could not move them. So my arms has to move the legs together. And after, the question was, how should they move? According to the human natural movement, you will see that when you are walking, your left arm and your right foot are forward. At the same time, you will see that your right arm and the left foot are backward, like on the trike. That was exactly this movement I used on the trike to repeat the same movement that someone who is walking normally. So for people, because some people who are in a wheelchair, half of them, they are incomplete. That means they have some feeling in the legs or some muscles activity in the legs. And using this device will help you to use the remaining muscle so you can use them in your daily life, like when you are transferring from the wheelchair to the car, or from the wheelchair to the toilet and so on. And this will help you to have less pain or less problem with your shoulders. The other thing was interesting is for the people who had some sensory movement, feeling, they will reduce their pain, and for the other, like me, it will make me a well-being. When I'm riding the trike, I feel very well to see my legs moving. The third one was also interesting to have this mobilization of the whole body. But what happens if you have no muscles activity? If you have no muscles activity and you're moving on the bicycle, that means you will have a disconnection between the upper part of your body and the legs, and that means you have no muscles activity. The only way to make the muscles active, that means when you are looking the bicycle here, if you want to have muscles active, you need something from outside. And that's FES, functional electrical stimulation, or EES, epidural electrical stimulation. I'm sure everyone here will say we know that. It's really still used by devices you can find on the market. That's not the problem. I use that, one of them also at home. But here we are doing something new. And this new idea was born in my head in 2015. In 2015, I went to Kenneth Hunt. I met him. Kenneth Hunt is a teacher, a professor at the University of Applied Science. And I asked him to do a device where a FES device connected to the trike. But this FES device connected to the trike has to do something more than just stimulate at the right moment. This system has to do something more. It was to connect the force of my arms, okay, measuring the force of my arms, and to send the right stimulation on my legs. So we did this work in 2016, was finished in 2016, and as you can see, we had a torque sensor. This torque sensor can measure the position plus the torque of the legs and on the arms. Sorry, something is going too fast, I don't know why. Here, in 2017, I was elected to be the Monté for the study in CHUV, Lausanne. This study is going about a stimulation, epidural electrical stimulation. So we have no ideas. But this epidural electrical stimulation is an electrode who is fixed on your spinal cord, and this electrode fixed on your spinal cord stimulates the nerves, so my muscles are activated, and when my muscles are activated, I can move my legs. Okay, that's basically the system. So when I came in this study, we tested for the first time in 2018 the feasibility between the EES system and the trike. That means the stimulation through my spinal cord and the electrode on the bicycle. That means that I had the right stimulation, the right moment on my bicycle through the stimulation on my spinal cord. Okay? But in this time we had no measurement of the force of the arms. So we did it in 2021, and in 2021, through a master project in life science engineering, Marco Roulet did this work together, and the objective of this work was her job was to bring this ES system after my ID on the Go trike, that means between the ES system and the Go trike together, to work together. And the idea was this: when you are riding your bicycle outside, when you are riding through the mountains, you are okay with me. When it's going uphill, you are pushing more on the pedals. And when it's going downhill, you are pushing less on the pedals. That was the main idea. And for that, we measured the force on the arms. That means the cranks for the arms had sensors. We measured this force, and with this force, we sent the right amplitude on the legs. Okay, on the legs, we had also on the pedal. For the feet, we had also sensors. And this stimulation was according to between the legs and the arm, they were connected together to have the right stimulation, the right moment, and the right amplitude. To test it, we measured the force on the arm that was on the lab. In the lab, as you can see, the first curve you can see on the upper side is the force we are measuring with the arms. That's 360 degrees when I'm pushing and pulling. Okay? That's the force we are measuring. On the legs, we did the same, measuring the force on the legs. But because I have no stimulation and no force in my legs, as you can see, it's just a sinusoidal force. What you see here is the reaction of the gravity on my legs. That means when I'm going with the movement, my legs with the gravity helps the movement, but when the pedal comes backward, the gravity on my legs give a counter force on the pedals, okay? And we did a comparison with a healthy subject. The healthy subject is the blue line here, and the black line is my line. You can see the difference on the pushing phase. And the goal was to bring the stimulation, to bring my stimulation, my force, my own force, in the direction of a healthy subject. And you can see it here. Okay? That was done. That means now we did different level of stimulation. When I'm pushing less, we have small stimulation of the legs, small force. When I'm pushing more, we are going to the second level, and so on. So we did 5 different levels. That's very interesting when you are doing it in the lab, but it's not really interesting for someone who is in a wheelchair. So we tested it outside, and it worked very well outside. I mean, I had the big pleasure to have this feeling when you are riding, and you see an uphill, the road is going uphill, and you are pushing more, and automatically your legs are pushing more. And that's some kind of connection between what I'm thinking with my head, with my brain. I want to push more, and I just realized that my legs are just pushing more on the right moment. That's something quite really amazing for me. It was something really amazing for me. So, to summarize what we did, it's that after 100 years, finally a vehicle that adapts to the disabled, I mean adapt with the legs and arms movement, respect the central pattern generator, doesn't move like this with the arms, but it moves like someone who is walking, and stimulate overall health. That means my body was stimulated from the top to down. Combine sport and rehabilitation. I don't have to go to do sport and after to do rehabilitation. Reduce also health costs, and brings intelligent, integrated electrical stimulation therapy out of the lab. I mean, all of them is something really interesting. To make it possible, it has something to do with collaboration. What I will show you here now is GBY is perhaps in the center of this project we had, but to have this project going well, we had to collaborate with different people. One of them was the Bern University of Applied Science for the vehicle. I mean, with my colleague, we did a lot for the vehicle itself. For the stimulation, we had a lot of work with NeuroRestore and the Bern University of Applied Science with stimulation also. And to do a device, because we wanted to know how it acts, and you can see this behind you. It's a device, a testing device. It was also done by the University of Applied Science. And to test what happens with the people, what happens with the body, we are working since 2020 with the University of Applied Science, and next year with the Swiss Paraplegic Research on human, and we are measuring what will happen on the body of the people who are using the trike. Some people told me that what I want to do here was impossible. But I think what's interesting in this project, working all together, is that in the middle you will find someone in a wheelchair. And that's something special. I mean, usually you find people in a wheelchair just to play the speaking monkey in the lab, but not to be part of the study. And for me, it was a big difference. And the project I had from the beginning was always supported by the Swiss Paraplegic Foundation, and thus for me it was also a big help from their side. Now I have to thank you, but for this, sorry, I don't know why it's going so fast. Sorry for that. It's not my control of the PowerPoint. I will just read something for you. When I was in intensive care, that was 8 years ago, and wondering what was going to become of me, what was going to be my life, I never imagined being here tonight with you. I'm very grateful to the people who have accompanied me since my accident in 2013. Nurses, therapists, doctors from the Schweizerische Paraplegics, research and scientists from University of Lausanne and NeuroRestore, work colleagues from GBY and BFH, University of Applied Science, and also my colleague in a wheelchair. But also my friends and my family that I love. Never forget, each of my ID was born in pain. The prototypes were made with hope, and solidarity allowed the product to exist. You gave me the rage to fight to make things better, not only for me, but for others as well. I want to end with a sentence from Heinz Frey. He wrote me yesterday because he could not be here tonight. He is in Bern. He wrote me this: so I will be in Bern, while you, I hope, will be in Notville for a revolutionary event. Thank you very much.
Sebastian, thanks a lot for this impressive talk, and we are very happy you had this idea and you're sharing this idea today with you, and we hope we will have some good discussions later to improve the product. But is there already any questions just right now? Yes?
Sebastian, may I ask you something? First of all, thank you for this brilliant idea you had to synchronize in this way electrical stimulation from arms to legs. We all know, or I know, that you are very well trained. So if you increase the intensity of stimulation by your arms that are well trained and are under voluntary control, how do you deal with fatigue in your legs regarding the size principle you have with electrical stimulation? Did you train your legs before with electrical stimulation, before you could reach a certain distance and velocity with the amplitudes?
So I'm someone who trains 12 hours a week, so I train a lot, but using the FES and the EES, I write everything at home, so I know exactly how many hours I'm using in both of them. I'm using today something like 40 minutes per week FES and something like 1.5 hour EES per week. Okay? And one of the main things, I think you asked a question very interesting, is for people who have this sensoric feeling, I think it's also important not just to have the stimulation, but when you are turning your legs without any effort, and you have a fixed stimulation, I can tell you it's really boring. Boring and disturbing. Because your legs are pushing like this, and you are just turning your arms, and it makes no sense to have stimulation at this moment. So connecting both of them, I mean, the voluntary movement you want to do with your brain, to connect it with the reality in your leg is something very important, I think.
That's without doubt.
Yeah.
I'm only talking about fatigue here that you can't influence.
Mm-hmm.
And this I'm very interesting how you synchronize this.
Mm-hmm. But you can see it after if you want.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, so then we will proceed to the next hall to get another puzzle of this whole technology. Next will be Professor Dr. Kenneth James Hunt. He will demonstrate how cycling with functional electrical muscle stimulation can improve the health of people with spinal cord injury. He will also give you an insight into his past participations at the Cybathlon, where he and his team won the bronze medal in 2016 and finished 4th place last year in the discipline Functional Electrical Stimulation by Grace. Kenneth Hunt is a professor at my department and head of the Institute for Rehabilitation and Performance Technology. He specializes in basic and applied research in the modeling and control of complex biomedical and healthcare-related systems. Applications are mainly in the fields of medical and sports engineering with a strong focus on cardiopulmonary and neurological rehabilitation. Kenneth, I'm looking forward to your talk.
Thank you very much, Lucas, for your introduction. And good evening, everyone, from my side. What I'd like to talk to you primarily about tonight is the application of functional electrical stimulation in some of the contexts that Sebastian has already introduced. And you can see the subtitle of my talk is From Lab to Cybathlon to Market. So we'll talk a little bit about research work. I'll describe some of the performances that we did in the 2 Cybathlon events that have been done so far. And I think most importantly, how we then take this technology into the market, in particular in collaboration with Sebastian and his company. As you'll see, what we're now working towards is to embed functional electrical stimulation, or FES systems, within multifunctional devices and not just using FES on its own. So I'll give you a brief overview of the basic concepts of FES. One of the problematical areas we have with FES is the very low efficiency that we achieve. I'll be talking about some ways we can overcome that, emphasizing the health benefits that can result from doing this form of exercise, and then the final part will be looking at practical implementation within product development. So the basic concepts, I think Sebastian has covered most of these. You can see here a recumbent tricycle situation, and this is one of the areas where we've applied to FES. This would be someone cycling normally with this extension and flexion movement, the command coming down from the brain and activating the muscles in the leg at the appropriate times to do the cyclical motion. When someone has a spinal cord injury, a motor complete spinal cord injury, we have to replace this function by an electronic stimulator and controller, here connected in some way to electrodes attached close to the muscles. And then if we turn the stimulation on now during extension, switch it off during flexion, then by this control mechanism we can produce a fairly normal cycling motion. This is the physical embodiment of the schematic system that you just saw. This was our system, the recumbent tricycle we used in the Cybathlon in 2016. Our pilot here is Julien Joufoy. He has a motor sensory complete spinal cord injury at the level of C7. And the machine, the cycle you can see here is actually on display just over there. You can see it in the exhibition after this event. And this is what the performance looks like. At the beginning of the race, the participants use this ramp just to get a bit of momentum going, to get them up to speed. And then the race begins. So the motion you can see here is produced only by stimulation of the paralyzed muscles. There is no motor assistance involved here. And Julien is controlling everything about the tricycle. In his left hand he has a gas pedal, if you like, to modify the intensity of stimulation. He can change gear with his right hand. We're using 3 channels of stimulation on each leg, and he also has to do steering and braking. So he's doing quite a lot of functions, but I think you can see here the movement at the beginning of the race is quite smooth. He's going very fast, and in fact this performance was the fastest performance by any of the participants who were using surface electrodes. The team that won the race, there was another team who won the race by virtue of the fact that they used a fully implanted stimulator. That was the team from Cleveland. So we're running here with electrodes attached to the surface of the skin. You can't see them here because he's wearing these cycling shorts, and this is the function that we achieved. The second cyclathon was 4 years later in 2020, just last year, and this was carried out virtually because of the situation. So when you look at the tricycle over here, you'll see the rear wheel is mounted on a trainer system, and we achieved the 4th place in this race. Cyclathon will take place again in 2024. And one of the devices I wanted to show you here as well is that we're not just developing mobile systems, a much more practical system or approach that we can use for day-to-day use at home or in the clinic are these stationary systems here. Here you can see the system with the electronic stimulator up here and the electrodes attached to the leg muscles. And this was developed by our partner company, Hazomed. So the way that we achieved this cycling motion with Julien was a little bit unusual. Perhaps we used 3 channels of stimulation on the quadriceps muscle. So this is on the upper thigh. And the muscles were stimulated over a certain range of the cycle to always produce a positive torque into the cranks. And the way FES works is we don't directly activate the muscle, we activate the motor nerves. And once the motor nerve is activated by the electrical pulses, the action potentials come down here and make a contraction for all of the muscle fibers connected to that single motor nerve. So the whole motor unit is activated. Okay, so that's the basics of FES. One of the limitations here I would like to talk about is the very low efficiency, the very low performance relative to healthy, normal cycling. And one way to view this efficiency is to look at the fact that what we have here is a system which is exchanging energy. The energy that we're putting into the system is metabolic energy achieved by breathing in oxygen. The muscles are utilizing the oxygen to do the work, and the output energy comes by the mechanical power going into the cranks. So the basic equation here is that the efficiency of cycling is the metabolic energy we're putting into the system divided by the work that we get out of the system. That's the efficiency. And what we found in a study of a number of participants here, the total efficiency of cycling with FES with spinal cord injured participants is very low. It's about 8%. So I'm sure everyone here realizes that's a very low number. For able-bodied, healthy people, you would achieve a cycling efficiency of about 30%. So this is 1/3 of what is normal. And the oxygen cost, the amount of oxygen you need to use to do that work, correspondingly is about 3 times higher than normal. So FES cycling on its own, due to this very crude method of stimulating the muscles and the very simple biomechanics, is very inefficient. That's the negative side. Moving to the positive side, I would say that despite these technical limitations and functional limitations, we still get very strong health benefits from doing this form of exercise. A number of years ago, we did a multi-center clinical trial of FES cycling, where the participants took part over a period of 1 year. They did a very intensive program of FES cycle training, and periodically during this time we made a number of clinical physiological measurements. We measured the basic cardiopulmonary fitness using this breath-by-breath system. We measured the bone density at different sites in the legs using PQCT, muscle properties using MRI scanning, and muscle function and strength using dynamometry. And this was a multi-center study involving my team. At that time I was in Glasgow, and also the Swiss Paraplegic Centre here in Knockville recruited some of the participants for this study, and there was another group in London taking part in that. And I'll come straight to the results, or the design and the results of this study. So we had 11 participants, all of whom were motor and sensory complete spinal cord injury. They trained at home, and the target was to achieve 5 one-hour sessions of training per week over this whole year period. So the results here, I'll focus on this one here. This is the summary of the physiological and health benefits that you can obtain. There were very large and substantial improvements in cardiopulmonary fitness, in bone density, muscle bulk and strength. And since that time there have been many studies that have confirmed these health benefits. And I would say that despite the inefficiency of cycling, we get these benefits. In fact, the inefficiency can in some ways be beneficial from a health point of view because it provides a higher load on the physiological system. So efficiency is actually good for health benefits. It's not good if we want to do mobile cycling outside. Okay, so let's move to the practical implementation of product development and see where we stand here. Now, actually, already in 2005, we, in collaboration with Hazelmet, the company, and while I was still at the University of Glasgow, we brought this product to the market, the Rehabike system that you can see here. This is a system which only uses FES. There are no motors embedded in this system. And you can see this person here has a motor-complete spinal cord injury. It's a tricycle. There's an FES system embedded within there to stimulate the muscles. In parallel with this mobile cycling development, Hazelmet then went on and developed this so-called Rehamove system, which is a stationary system I showed you earlier on. And that one is that's a picture from their latest version of this product in 2021. We then went on to look at the development of further devices. This one you can see here has evolved over the last 5 or 6 years. This came from a suggestion, in fact, from Bern from the Swiss Paraplegic Center, who asked if we could develop a device like this with a combined arm and leg movement. Previously, there was a device on the market which mechanically coupled the arms and the legs, but here they are decoupled and the connection between the arms and the legs is purely electronic. This system then evolved once Sebastian Tobler got involved in the system. We effectively took the drive units up here, but transformed the base unit down at the bottom into something that looks like this. This is what we are calling at the moment the bipedal device. And you can see it actually, the latest version is at the back of this hall. You can try that out in the exhibition. So you'll recognize here the same drive unit with the arms and the legs, and control unit at the back, and a biofeedback screen at the front. And I think you can begin to see here, this system is very similar in its function to the GoTrike that Sebastian presented earlier. So this is more like a stationary version of the GoTrike that allows us to do systematic testing and scientific study of the effect of this type of synchronized arm and leg motion. I'd like to show you a video here that shows you this evolution from the initial system up to the product, or the product development you can see at the back. So the legs and the arms are turning here. The arms can give the command, the master, and the legs turn by the power of the electric motor down here. So it's a kind of master-slave system where the arms are giving the commands and the legs are following. There's a biofeedback screen and there's an integrated FES system that can stimulate basically any muscles that you would wish to stimulate in the arms and the legs. This is a picture from last year in the University of Lausanne in Jérôme Baral's lab. He'll be talking about later on this evening, to show this transformed device with the drive units at the front, but the base unit is changed. And here's the first tester of the system. I think you can probably recognize him. Transferring more or less independently onto the machine. Jérôme positions the boom with the drives, and then we fix the legs in these orthoses here. So Sebastian here is driving the device with his arms volitionally, and the legs will be turning by the power of the electric motors which are built into the system. So he has some commands he has to follow. These are the speed commands he has to follow. He's doing that with his arms, and then the legs are powered by the electric motors down at the bottom. And he seemed to be quite satisfied with that first testing system. So moving on to another project we have started with Sebastian, a collaboration between the BFH and GBY. You'll recognise over here the GoTrack system, and the GoTrack is also available at the back. And we're just about to start a new 2-year project funded by Suisse, which is designed to embed a functional electrical stimulation system as a commercial product option into the GoTrack system. So the approach that we're now taking, the strategy we are now taking based on the basic limitations of FES, is not to use it on its own, but to embed FES within multifunctional systems such as the GoTrack or the bipedal system. That's the way to overcome the fundamental limitations that I've described. So I'd like to conclude this talk just by making 1 or 2 comments. I would say that FES technology now is a very well developed technology. It's also been proven that there are many physiological and health benefits that one can gain by doing this exercise. There is potential for recreational usage, but using FES on its own does have its limitations. And so the solution we are now following is to embed this technology within multifunctional rehabilitation and recreational devices. So I'd like to conclude there. I would invite you to have a look at these systems and to try them out for yourself at the exhibition. And I'd like to thank you for your attention. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ken, for these interesting insights. Is there any question? My question is, if I use these activators, these FES activators, how much pain does that cause?
For you, it would cause a lot of pain because you're neurologically intact. So the sensory, well, what happens when we stimulate through the skin, we're not only stimulating the motor nerves, we also stimulate the sensory nerves. That's why you feel pain. We cannot distinguish between motor and sensory nerves. So in that sense, someone who has a sensory complete spinal cord injury has the advantage. They don't feel any pain. So for people with some sensation, there would be a limit on how much you can stimulate before the pain becomes too much. So that's a limitation.
Okay, thank you. Some other question? Then we continue and we will do at the end, when we have heard all the talks, some next question round. So, thank you again, Ken. Next will be Professor Jocelyn Bloch and Professor Dr. Grégoire Courtine. They will present to you how neurotechnologies can augment recovery after spinal cord injury. Grégoire Courtine is a professor of neuroscience and neurotechnology in the Center of Neuroprosthetics at EPFL and in the Department of Neurosurgery at University Hospital Lausanne, where he is the director of the DEFITEC Center for Interventional Neurotherapies, together with Jocelyn Bloch. Jocelyn Bloch herself has acquired an extensive experience in deep brain stimulation and neuromodulation for movement disorders, pain and epilepsy. Besides leading the Neurostore together with Grégoire Courtine, she is also head of the functional neurosurgical unit at the University Hospital Lausanne. Stage is yours. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. So you see, with the biography, we are the kind of people that Sebastian described before. The professor who are using the speaking monkeys. And with Jocelyn, we are indeed the co-director of this center, no restore, very recent. We founded it 2 years ago only, with the idea to bring together the engineering of EPFL with the medical expertise of the CHUV. And there is a very strong philosophy that we try to apply in all our development, which is captured in these little circles. And you're going to see a little bit about this idea, that we go all the way from in-depth understanding of the science, with a lot of work in animals, all the way to this transition to proof of concept in humans and hopefully applications in company. So, spinal cord injury, you all know that if there is a lesion, the communication between the brain and the spinal cord are interrupted. However, all the spinal cord below the injury is completely intact, disconnected from the brain, so it cannot function, but we can reactivate the spinal cord with many tools, one of them being epidural electrical stimulation of the spinal cord, as Sebastian mentioned. So imagine, in this case, very simply, you put some electrode on the lumbar region to reactivate the spinal cord electrically, and you have a rat with a complete paralysis. When we apply the stimulation, it can walk beautifully. You turn off the stimulation, immediately locomotion stops. Turn it back on, and immediately he resumes walking. And from this moment, there's a strong temptation to jump to clinical application, but we really before wanted to understand the underlying mechanism. So what we did, engineers they like to build models. So we modeled the spinal cord to understand the kind of electrical field that are induced by this stimulation. You see it flows on the side, and what we found is that this stimulation will not activate. Indeed, we are missing some slides. So will not penetrate directly the spinal cord, but actually flow on the side, the liquid called cerebrospinal fluid, and it will activate the neural structure with the least resistant to current. These are the thick afferent fibers, the sensory fiber, that are connecting the muscle to various neurons, including motor neurons, to activate muscles. So it's very important to understand that we don't activate the spinal cord, but really all the different dorsal roots. And this is one of the key advantages why we don't add fatigue, because it's a natural recruitment of the motor unit as opposed to FES, which activate the motor nerve directly, meaning the think one, very fatigable. Why is it important? Well, because you understand the mechanism of action, activating the dorsal root entry zone, we can operate the transition from like a very continuous stimulation, empirical, to what we like to call biomimetic stimulation, meaning trying to reproduce the way the spinal cord is activated naturally for walking, cycling, different type of movement that we are involved in the legs. With a caveat, which is what is the activity in the spinal cord when we walk, cycle, swim, etc., etc. So you need a framework to understand it. We cannot measure directly the activity in the spinal cord. And here what we found is if we record the activity of leg muscles, this is a classic electromyography activity that you can record with the surface electrode that you position on the skin over the muscle. This is a classic sequence during walking, and we know theoretically where the different motor neurons that activate these muscles are located in the spinal cord. There is a rostrocaudal distribution, and we can represent the activity of this muscle directly onto their location to build this map. This is a spatio-temporal map of motor neuron activation. This is how the spinal cord is activated during walking, and you see there are clear hotspots. One is for weight acceptance, then for propulsion, and the last one in blue is for swing. So it's not that we activate the spinal cord distributed all over, but there is a sequence of hotspots, and that's what we want to reproduce to facilitate, in this case, for example, walking. And you do this by targeting the roots that project to these different segments. I emphasize this because it's a really important concept here. We understand what we activate, and we can leverage this principle in order to have a very precise stimulation of the spinal cord to restore function. That's when you are ready to talk to a neurosurgeon.
So how did we do that?
Implement this stuff.
Yes, how did we do that? So we used actually first an existing technology to treat pain, chronic pain. So we needed a stimulator and electrodes on the spinal cord. So the electrodes we had first, and then we developed others. We thought better to recruit more muscles, were implanted over the spinal cord, on the dorsal part of the spinal cord, epidurally. So with these electrodes, we were able to stimulate. So look at here, that is the famous monkey where you see Sebastian, who was in this study, and again, so you see him before stimulation, unable to step, And with this stimulation, this physiological stimulation activating the different parts of the spinal cord that are recruiting the different muscles that are necessary to step, you see that he's able, of course, maybe not like us, but Sebastian always says that he walks like a monkey. It's not really true, but at least he could step. So with this kind of stimulation, and then with the lead that we developed then that was bigger and that could also stimulate the muscles of the trunk, we could do other exercises, not only stepping, but this kind of exercises that helps for the transfer, for example, and also other exercises of the trunk, helping the patient to go forward, to bend, and go backwards then, and that's also very useful. So with these two other functions, we were quite happy, and all of these participants, some of them, I said, with the previous lead, some of them with the new lead, some of them were completely paralyzed, some of them incompletely paralyzed, but all of them were able, with the stimulation, to walk, to step, to exercise. And for this exercise is very important. And with exercise, what happens? You can have recovery. So patients who had a long paralysis, for example, this one was 7 years with a paralysis, after a few months of training, started moving the left leg. And after 5 months, you see it's even increased, so you see that there is a potential of plasticity. Here you see the same patient who at the beginning was not able to walk without stimulation between parallel bars. Here you see without stimulation, he has recovered a bit more function and is able to walk between these two parallel bars. So all these participants gained functions. Some are the ones who are more paralyzed, less than the ones who are less paralyzed, but all of them gained something.
And because of the philosophy of neuro-restore, and I told you we go from animals all the way to human, we wanted to understand why we observe this neurological recovery, which could be quite extensive in some of the participants, despite many years of paralysis. So there is a neurological recovery suggesting a remodeling of the spinal cord, the growth of new connections. That's when we can go back to animals to try to understand the underlying mechanism. And you know, we live a quite extraordinary moment in neuroscience when we can, for example, obtain brain and spinal cord that are completely transparent. So we remove the myelin that diffracts the light, and we can see through, and we can label different neuronal pathways with viruses, so we can see neuronal connection for the first time without any bias, of cutting tissue, etc. You never know which one are spared or not. There is a lot of issues in the field of spinal cord injury with false discoveries. Here it's real, because now you can see the pathway from the brain in blue, from the brainstem in white, the contusion, as you can see, is in red. So you can see all this pathway going down the spinal cord. The corticospinal tract from the brain is fully interrupted, and you see it's retract. Classically, the brainstem is partly spared to some extent, and these spared fibers, they sprout massively, you see, in the middle, in the gray matter, in response to the intervention, especially where we stimulate. So you induce the growth of new connection, if they are sparing. That's the descending pathway, and what we found also is a lot of remodeling below the injury. When you engage this circuitry, it remodels over time. And we can even visualize this in humans. So here we have been able to record the neuronal activity in the human spinal cord during walking. And surprisingly, what you observed is a strong activity in the lumbar region, as expected. This is where you have the neuron controlling the muscle. But after training, there is much less activity. And you can see this almost in all the participants. And what we found is that there's a lot of remodeling, like some neurons become selected and become very efficient in activating the muscles in order to walk. Yet, not enough. Sebastian would complain all the time. I've been walking for hours in the lab, still don't walk outside. Indeed, it's not enough, especially without the stimulation. So we wanted to be able to support mobility outside. And for this, they needed the stimulation. So we tried to develop a first solution, which is still very tailored and not perfect, but there's a tablet or also a connected watch that they can use to turn on the stimulation. And typically we use our clickers or even IMUs, you can see attached here on the foot. And that's what triggers the stimulation. For example, swing or stance or the different phases of the trike, etc. You will have a demonstration after if you want. And with this technology, the majority of our participants can go outside, outdoor, to perform activities they could not do without the stimulation. If it works. That was fake actually, it doesn't work. Okay? No. So, you want to try to trigger it manually? Or? Well, anyway, what you should see here, someone fully paralyzed who is doing boxing. This is the individual Justin has shown before who could not use his trunk. Here stimulating, has enough stability to do paddling, some people walking, and Sebastian doing some trike, of course. Which we will not go into details because he showed you how nicely it works for him. Although we need to make it much better. The problem, however, is very unsatisfying. And Sebastian found some tricks. You know, you link it to the hand, but the best would be, of course, to be able for the participant or patient to control the stimulation directly with their thought. Works. Can you imagine? Then you would have full control over the stimulation and, you know, the movement of your leg. Or would we do that, Jocelyn?
Yes, so initially when we spoke about this a few years ago, we thought it still would be science fiction, but actually this happened a few months ago. So we decided to link the brain to the spinal cord. How would we do that? So we take a device with electrodes that we put on the motor cortex, and we look at with an MRI exactly where the motor cortex, the leg area is located, and then we implant these electrodes able to record over the skull. It's not an intracerebral surgery, it's replacing actually the bone, and it communicates then with the spinal cord stimulation, so with the stimulator that is in the belly of the patient that is stimulating then the spinal cord, and together there is this bridge, digital bridge, taking your thoughts of you want to walk, this is recorded, decoded by the system, and then you stimulate directly, and depending on what you want to do, you have to train actually your decoder, and this understands very well the different movement you want to perform. So in that case, another candidate, Gertjan, that Sebastian knows pretty well, that was before entering STIMO study, and then so with this brain-spine interface, so look at him, he has this antenna, he's wearing a helmet that is recording the brain activity, and this brain activity is transmitted to the different joints. And the very nice thing is that he's able to make a modulation of his force. When he thinks more of bending the hip or the knee, he's able to sustain a movement. He's able to walk and talk. So it means that the decoding of this area is very specific and it's not disturbed by the other thoughts you have. So it's the first, it's very interesting, and for him also it's pretty new because he has the impression that he's really the one who is at the origin of the movement and not an external device.
So of course you see there's still a few cables, etc., computer following, etc. So you need to miniaturize everything, put everything in the body, but we do believe that there's a potential to use this type of technology, especially for the upper limb, and maybe even one day for mobility, so that people like David would be able to not walk. The video are capricious today. And not only because, you know, what we have understood with this idea that we stimulate the dorsal root is that we have a spinal cord gateways, an entry in the spinal cord that embed many neurological functions. We don't have time to talk about it today, but we have been developing intervention to also improve blood pressure, the bladder. We are targeting also the hand function. And with the idea that we want to bring this technology to the community to help people with spinal cord injury to regain function. Maybe we should do something with the slide. This is the beauty of technology. So basically, we are academic professors, so we do proof of concept, but we do want to bring this to the community. For this, we have created a company. So all the logo have been hidden nicely by we have prepared a presentation. It's called Onward Medical, and Onward Medical is developing this implantable pulse generator with dedicated electrode array for the different regions of the spinal cord. And hopefully soon there will be large clinical trial to make sure that this technology can be used throughout the world for people with spinal cord injury. Thank you very much.
For this interesting talk. Is there any question? Otherwise, my question is, how long do we have to wait till we get this on the market and can use it?
It will come step by step, but soon.
Okay.
We hope, the implantable devices that we can use, let's hope that in 3 years they'll be with us.
Okay. Great. Any other question? Otherwise, we will follow the program and we'll
Thank
have
you very
at
much.
the end
Absolutely,
question
with pleasure.
round. Next will be Professor Sara Rubinelli. She will show you how usability evaluation can enrich the TRIKE study mentioned earlier using person-centeredness, co-creation and technology engagement. Sara Rubinelli is Professor in Health Science with a focus in health communication at the Department of Health Science and Medicine of the University of Lucerne. She's the scientific coordinator of the Human Functioning Unit at Swiss Paraplegic Research, where she leads the Person-Centered Healthcare Group. Furthermore, she is past president of the International Association for Communication in Healthcare. Please. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, good afternoon and thank you very much. It is an honor for me to be present at this point, and I was really fascinated to hear all the presentation we had before. And I'm happy to present you a different perspective on science, which is very important. That's why the official title of my presentation is the TRIKE, it's innovation through usability evaluation. But as a matter of fact, I'm going to do a tour in the world of user experience research for a very basic reason. We may have nowadays all the devices that we want, even very useful from a health perspective, but if people does not use them, we can just leave them there. And you see, in many things, we have a lot of devices which will be very useful, but it's very much important to understand the behavior of people and why people would be motivated. And this is why, in my team, health communication with an expertise in qualitative research. I'm very much interested in performing research on the behavior. And the starting point is the TRIKE. We have seen before, Sebastian Tobler has shown us the TRIKE with all the potential of this. But, the perspective is, how can we further identify what is innovative and useful for people on this device by looking at the behavior? Because what users think is not marginal, And this is an approach that in marketing research has been always very considered. Just know that the iPhone that we all now use, just to give an example, came out of course, technological part, but a lot of behavioral studies on people, consumer need, what they want, what they like. And nowadays, I have to say it's rather recent, in research we have a major emphasis on three concepts. Participatory research, working with the users, but not simply study, which is very different, which was the traditional approach. We study users. Now, in behavioral sciences, we work with the users. So, the other key concept of user engagement and user experience research. And all of this has been possible because nowadays we are very much developed in the so-called behavioral sciences and the cognitive sciences. So, then using the track as an example, we can bring up innovative aspect understanding two basic framework: the technology acceptance model and the user experience research. And here I put a photo of Richard Fagozzi, which is a consumer psychologist who was very much in the drive of this approach, which we now use in healthcare to do the so-called healthcare participatory research design. Yeah. Here we have modeled the behavior which lead to the actual use of something. And of course, we use a device when we have the intention to do so, which means basically we like to do the behavior. If the intention is negative, we dislike doing the behavior and then we don't use it. And this, according to the technology acceptance models, these behaviors comes out from the perceived usefulness and the perceived ease of use plus some external variable. I show you more in detail. The behavioral intention is what leads people to use the technology. And the perceived usefulness is the degree to which a person believes that using a particular device will enhance job performance. So I use two device if I think this can help me in doing better something first. But very much important is the perceived ease of use. How much effort I have to use in this. And we all have experience sometimes that we have very great devices, too complex, too difficult, too, let's say, they require too much strength, and therefore, despite potential usefulness, we do not use them. This is everything which is labeled in the user experience device. With two main approaches. We have the qualitative research, therefore you really actually sit with people in focus group, in interviews, in diary taken. So you really ask people, use this and let me know what you think. I sit with you and you tell me what is good, what is a barrier. And then, of course, you can also have quantitative research when you want to build the qualitative result on a larger scale. So there is an attitudinal approach, the importance of listening to people, and the behavioral, the importance of observing behavior. These two combinations, which one would say, yeah, it's normal that people look at this, just know that they lead to most of innovative aspects nowadays in technology development. Because it's where really you study with people. And I give you an example here of a study we have conducted. It was a self-management app for pressure injuries. We prototype this app precisely using this experience user research endeavor. And it came out with a lot of factors pro and contra, but moreover, by indicating people could indicate very well what were the features of this app that would need to strengthen further, refine, modify, or enrich. This means, basically, to understand acceptability, usability, satisfaction, enjoyment, which is a key indicator of a lot of utilization of devices and effort. And all of this has to come from a calibration of things. Because if these factors do not come into play, you can have a great problem, but people will not be so happy to use it. So, research on this is very much important to assure a long-term use of our technology. How many of us have downloaded some tools for tracking, for example, calories, something like that, and then use this maybe for 1 week, 2 weeks, but then realize, is it really too long every day to write down a list of what I eat to calculate my calories. So, although this could be very important, we don't do it. And the similar things happen here. So what our intention is to enrich, let's say, the more health outcome-oriented research on the trial with this behavioral perspective, which means to study how the drug is accepted, it is used, with barrier by highlighting the individual perspective of the end users. Why is this relevant? Many things. Barrier facilitator, innovative, really innovative users, but not so much from a technological perspective, but from the point of view of person who maybe for years have used other devices. So what is it in this one? Also, you can ask people perceived health, which of course is not health outcome, but nevertheless is the feeling that people can have when using this. And this is absolutely very important as well. Advantages and disadvantages. And all of this, of course, provide important guideline, an important point to further develop a product. So just to conclude, the behavioral sciences and the cognitive sciences nowadays have developed tools, models, which nicely and importantly complement the more clinical, biological, physiological, mechanical research on devices. And nowadays I think the great things here is that looking at this group together, we can complement the different dimensions, which add together for really, what I say, doing something for others, which means really doing a value which is interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary, but also build up together a very strong body of knowledge. And this is why, as SPF, we are very, Swiss Paraplegic Research, we are extremely happy to be here and involved in this. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for this interesting talk. Is there right now a question? Yes?
Thank you, Dara, for this really important perspective from my point of view. So I want to bring in, and I'm sure you already mentioned in your articles, the cultural aspect, and so how to say also the financial aspect. And I see it here by treating patients all over the world with electronic devices in terms of electrical stimulation. I recognized that a cultural aspect, even in Switzerland, where we have three little parts, I would say, the French, the Italian, the German-speaking part, is quite different. And so, do you include it, especially with the trikes, this aspect, in your research? Because I see people from the Italian-speaking part and French-speaking part, they are very keen on using technologies if they can afford them. In the German-speaking part, so patients are more relaxed, bring me something, to say it a little bit extreme. I don't want to put all on the same level, but I see these tendencies here.
Absolutely. It's a very important point because it makes a huge difference indeed in the utilization. And it's true also what you say, Switzerland is a tricky country in this sense because there are three different cultures. And this applies even more internationally if you think to have this. So definitely, normally when you do this study, you make sure that you select the sample, or let's say the people who are going to work on this according to certain variables. Can be lesion, can be years on a wheelchair, but very much important, the life, the culture, the age also is a very important thing because we cannot assume that this can work at all levels, what ages. And of course, it requires a lot of work on this because all these variables need to be tested in a way that is significant enough to make then some proper result. But of course, it's absolutely important. And I have to say, for many years, this was not an approach. It was very much top-down in certain dimension, and that limited very much the applicability of certain findings. So hopefully, yes, we will work on that.
Okay, Sarah, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So we will come already to the last presentation, and we will hear PhD Sharon Baal. He will give us an insight into how arm movements can help to achieve spontaneous muscular activations of the legs. Sharon Baal is a senior lecturer at the Institute of Sports Sciences and the University of Lausanne. There he is also engaged in the brain, electrophysiology, attention movement laboratory, as well as in the Interdisciplinary Center for Sports and Research. Please, the stage is yours.
Well, thank you very much. I would like to first to thank Sebastian Tobler and Kenneth Hunt to give me the opportunity to collaborate on that topic. And this is a very nice collaboration that we began 2 years ago. And in this project, the cardiac study, we are using this machine that has already been explained by Kenneth. And in this project, so we first tested this machine to see the potential for our research. So yes, Sebastian, you're right. It makes sense. It makes sense if we to use the arm to help the legs to move. I would like to remind that, of course, you say also this point that the arms have a functional role in during human walking, and the rhythmic movement, more precisely the rhythmic movement of the arms contribute to minimize energy consumption, but also to optimize the stability of walking. The coordination between the upper limbs and the lower limbs are possible via sensory motor controllers that are located in the spinal cord. They are also called central pattern generator, and you have one CPG at the cervical and one CPG at the lumbar level. And these two CPG are connected via propriospinal neurons. The neuronal coupling between the arms and the legs have been evidenced in many research. I can just show you an example. If you measure the H reflex, which is an electrophysiological measure of the reflex at the spinal cord, if you measure this H reflex at the soleus, and you ask the participant either to stay static or to move the arms, you see modulation of the soleus H reflex and a reduction of the amplitude in the arm cycling condition. I would like also to speak about the study of Daniel Ferris. In this study, he was interested in the arms and legs coupling in neurological intact people, and they used this kind of recombinant device where the arms can actively move the legs that are passive. So we have to understand that the legs are not static, they are passive, they move, but they move because the arms are moving. And when they record the EMG, they observe an activation of the muscle of the legs, mainly in the condition when the participant is actively moving the arms, but not when it is the experimenters that move the arms, which means that actively moving the arms to drive passively the lower limb stepping motion exhibit legs muscle activation. It is a manifestation of this neuronal coupling between the legs and the arms. I would like to finish this introduction and report this very interesting study by Kawishima and collaborator in 2008 They are using a kind of elliptic device. And in this study, they invited people with spinal cord injury, participants with cervical incomplete spinal cord injury or thoracic complete spinal cord injury. What they asked to these participants to do, first, in the first condition, they just asked them to don't move the arms, and the experimentator was moving the legs. So we can see the EMG activity of the soleus. In the second condition, they asked the participant to hold the handles, and this is the experimentator that moved the arms, and you can see an increase of EMG or muscle activation in the legs. And in the third condition, they ask the participant to move actively the arms, and you see again an increase of the muscle activation in the legs. So this result suggests that the neural signal from the arms contribute to shape the locomotor pattern in the legs. This is what is interesting us in this project, and the literature we found in the literature linked to this previous result. Two postulates. The first one is that non-gait specific rehabilitation training therapies may improve walking performance, and the other postulate is that, excuse me, activation of cervicolumbar networks, as in arm and leg cycling task, compared with lumbar networks alone, is critical to enhancing the benefits of rehabilitation. So in the product project, we are interested to know more about the factor that can activate these cervicolumbar networks. So the aim of the product project is to explore the arm-driven quadricycline factors that stimulate the activation or the reactivation of the lower limbs muscles. And the goal will be to adapt the modalities of the training program for people with severe limitation in lower limbs function. So, as I mentioned at the beginning, we are using this machine, the bipedal device. So you understand that this machine has two motors, one for the arms and one for the legs. And these two motors are interconnected to move the legs when the arms are moving. So we can implement arms and leg cycling experiment, but also we can assess motor performance. The main characteristic of the bipedal device is that we can adjust the position of the participant according to the body size. We can also set different parameters of interest, for example, the resistance of the cycling or the cadence of the cycling. We can also provide feedbacks on the performance, which is also something that is interesting in this kind of study. We can also generate data for offline analysis, and interestingly, we can also synchronize other recording devices with this machine. And we are using, for example, EMG that I will explain later. So during the COVID period, we had the opportunity to run a pilot study with 8 non-disabled people. So the task was to move the arm while relaxing the legs. And you see here that the legs are passively driven in synchronization with the arms movement. So you have a condition where the participant can have a feedback and a condition where he doesn't use any feedback. So in this project, we are, of course, interested by the EMG activity, and I would like to share with you some interesting results that we obtained in the testing phase of this project. If we look at the EMG signal, and if we ask the participant to, because the population is non-disabled people, we ask the participant to move the legs. In this condition, you have a very nice EMG signal. If we ask the participant to move the arms while the legs are passive, interestingly, we see some burst of EMG in this condition that totally disappear if it's the experimenter that moves the arms. So we replicate what we observed in the study in the past. So if we redo the same, we see again the EMG activity, and if it is again the experimenter that moves the arms of the participant, we don't see any activity in the legs. So this is very interesting, and the condition of interest for the Quadrac study is this condition, arms active and legs active, and we would like to know what are the factors that can boost this neural coupling in this condition. So we decided, for example, to modulate the cadence of the cycling or the power, the resistance of the movement. We individualize the power value according to the body mass of each participant. We have 3 different power and 3 different cadence. Shortly, I can show you how to. So we have an easy task and an heavy one, 20 watts and 60 watts. And if we look the EMG and we compute and quantify the EMG with the root mean square, we can see that in the 20 watts condition we don't have a lot of EMG activity, but in the 60 watts condition, the EV1, we can see a lot of EMG activity. So it seems that if you increase the resistance, you can observe an increase of the EMG activation. Now quickly, I am close to the end of my presentation. We can also, with the machine, compute an index of stability, which can be interesting in this experiment. The index of stability is the stability of the movement. This index increases, if this index increases, the movement is less stable, and if the index decreases, the movement is stable. We can compare this index of stability according to the different power and different cadence. And for example, here, we can say, looking at this point, that moving fast with low resistance seems to increase the instability of arm cycling. That could be very important if we consider training session, and if we consider training session, we have to consider the fatigue that can be increasing linked to this instability of the movement. And the second result I would like to share with you, if we look at the increase of EMG, we computed the percentage of increase of the EMG according to a baseline, and you see that this percentage increase means more activation in the condition that are mentioned here, the cadence and the 2 modalities of the power. And for example, we can say here that the quadriceps activation seems to increase at low speed and high power, or increase at low speed and high power compared to low speed and low power, which seems to indicate that if we modulate and change the parameter, we also change the response at the leg levels. So in conclusion, the first step have confirmed the great potential of the bipedal device to reach our aims. We need more experiment, but for the moment that's the result we have in this testing session. And currently the bipedal device is receiving some updates, but I see that the updates are on the machine. And we expect to restart the experiment soon. And of course, if you want to touch and try this machine, don't hesitate to go in this exhibition place. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jérôme. Is there a direct question to him? Otherwise, I would ask all the speakers again on the stage so we can have a complete discussion together. Okay, who has the first question? Okay.
I have a question. We all know, studies are saying 70% of people who are sitting down in the office have problems with their back or their neck. I'm wondering what has been done so far to be bringing people who broke their back or their neck in a different position than a wheelchair. It's a chair after all.
Who wants to answer?
Okay.
You're asking why we are not, why we are sitting all the day long in a wheelchair.
I'm more wondering why my back is being I feel that my back is being compressed all the time. I have stabilization in my back, but it doesn't really help me so much that I would feel that I can actually heal. I feel that I'm under constant pressure and it makes me feel so, like it hurts me so much that I could cry. But all that I receive is the pills from the doctors as anti-painkillers. No, I don't want to have painkillers. I believe that the body tells me things that I should listen to. So I would have something that would stretch my back. Like, move, as you say, move, heal.
But someone who is a normal person has also his pressure on his back, so on his spinal cord.
This is not entirely true because the hips are constantly moving and the pressure or the position where the point is constantly, it's a minor adjustment, but it's there.
Okay, but when you are riding the trike, your hips are moving.
I'm not saying, I haven't tried. I haven't got a trike. Hey, I love
That's
it.
why you can try a handbike and you will see your hips are not moving.
No, I love the go trike. I believe that if I'm gonna get somewhere, I'm gonna get with a GPY. Don't get me wrong. I mean, just
No, some doctors answers.
Not specialized. Somebody here who has an answer?
A physiotherapist in the audience. Can you answer? She wants to know if there are positions, there are seats or special position that you can. I mean, did some people work on some devices that make you change the position in order not to be always compressed when you're sitting? That's if I summarize.
yes, it's a completely like and also every other person that I spoke to and was in a wheelchair, they say how good this feels, right? Yeah, it feels good. You know, stretch back, feel the back space to heal. The back can heal. It's a miracle.
So yeah, for example, the patient that we just implanted a few weeks ago, as soon as he turns the stimulation on, he feels that he has a better posture, he has less issues breathing, and he feels much better due to this improved posture he has. So yes.
But the basic position is still the same as far as I understand.
Kind of, because as like the positioning of the trunk changes, it doesn't have like the same pressure points where he's sitting. So there is a slight difference too.
So maybe someone will come up in the near future with a solution for that. Some other question?
Sorry, may I come back to you to this fatigue of not, I'm speaking about surface stimulation.
So, are you planning with this GoTrike to have a feedback system that shows you by going faster with a good upper extremity to regulate down if fatigue in the leg occur, to avoid a long-term fatigue by surface electrical stimulation? That's a question. Do you have those plans to do?
Yeah, of course, we have sensors for the arms and sensors for the feet. And that means when you're pushing more with your arm, if you are someone who has a little bit function in your legs, we will bring the amount of stimulation, just the amount to reach the force you need on the legs. That means you have the feedback from the legs on the system by the sensor you have on the pedals that will be used in the system. So you know when you have the fatigue, and you will increase the stimulation, but you know also, so with the time you will see the stimulation going higher, higher and higher, but you will not over stimulate the muscles. That's the goal also. That means measuring the force you have on the pedal is something very important, and we are using it.
So in other words, Sebastian, it means if the force in the legs is decreased, the stimulation can't be increased because of this. True. Did I understand it right? Right.
But what I want to tell is just that the system is also used to see what happens with the legs, and that's very important.
Yeah.
I mean, after you will just increase the stimulation for nothing, and that is exactly what we don't want to do.
Okay. Thanks. Yeah.
Okay, some other question? Then I would give the chance to Sebastian to formulate a wish to these people for your near future, what they have to develop or investigate for you to get you more successful.
Thank you very much, but I was not prepared for that. But no, one thing what's for me very important, I don't know if you really understand what I was trying to tell you is I never thought before that it would be possible to work together. And for me, it was of the main success we had today is to find on stage all these different teams from all different parts of Switzerland and different scientific culture, because sometimes we have heard about quantitative, qualitative, and so on. And for me, it's really interesting, and it's really a hope for the future. And I'm very, very thankful for all these scientists who answered my question. Of course, I never came to them without nothing. Often I came to them like for Gregor and Justin, I came with a trike and asked them to bring the system on the trike. When I came to Jerome, I asked just him, if I bring you a device to do some measurement, will you do study with me? And he told me definitely yes. And when I went to Kenneth, it was exactly the same. He was already really someone interested for. And for me, that's really the success, is when the people are interested more than just their own study, and they are looking a little bit further, and they are looking also the people who are in the wheelchair and trying to work with them. And that's for me one of the biggest success we had in this group, and it's just the beginning. That's just the beginning, and I will be very thankful for every one of you.